I want to start by saying that this message is not prescriptive. It is descriptive of my experience and maybe of yours if you are watching this and if you're drawn to this. And if so, I hope that it helps you to feel like you can locate yourself among other people in the midst of everything that we are experiencing at this moment of crisis and chaos and collapse of the status quo. And I offer that caveat because I know that there are a lot of people right now who are experiencing really intense emotions about what's occurring in the United States. And consequently, of course, the impact on the rest of the world, because what happens here is consequential for every other being on the planet. And you are not wrong to be feeling that way if you are experiencing really intense shock and grief and outrage and confusion and disillusionment. If you're feeling this sense of disbelief that this is really happening here and now, and disbelief that you are living through this right now, those responses understood and valid. And if you are feeling that way in this moment, this video is probably not for you. And I hope that you're able to access the spaces and the resources and the support that you need so that you are not alone in holding and being with those feelings, so that you can safely allow your nervous system to respond in exactly the way that it needs to right now. But some of us, and I think there's maybe less visible or vocal discussion of this in online spaces right now, because a lot of what we are witnessing in online spaces is this imperative to speak out, to voice your dissent and your resistance and your rage and your fear and your disillusionment. And that is important. But some of us are not there right now. Some of us are not shocked. And this is for you if you fall in this category. If you are noticing that there are people around you who are experiencing a lot of distress and you are not, if you are aware of what's happening, not bypassing what's happening, witnessing and allowing emotional responses to move through you as they move through you about what's happening, choosing how you want to respond to what's happening, but not in a state of shock, not in a state of turmoil or distress internally. If this is where you are, then this is a message for you. So, I am a Black woman, and I am descended from enslaved Africans who were trafficked and brought to this country by force and made to be regarded as less than human, super exploited in order to build this thing that we call the United States. So, my lineage, my epigenetics, they make it such that there was never any myth or illusion which could be shattered for me. Before I was born, when I was a cell inside of the embryo that was my mother, inside of the womb that belonged to my grandmother, I already knew, that cell already knew that there was no myth or illusion for us to hold on to. And so for that reason, this moment for me does not feel like an aberration. It does not feel like a break or a split from what this place has been, from what this place has already shown itself to be from its inception. And when I say this place, I mean the nation state that is the United States. And so when you add to that Yes, being a Black woman. Yes, being a Black woman who has studied and been engaged in political education and organizing, but also being a very intuitive and highly energetically sensitive person, being someone who had to, from a very young age, in order to navigate the world in the safest way possible, feel and attune to what was not visible or tangible, hear what was not stated explicitly, read what was implied between the lines, who had to know with my body even when there was no material evidence to support what my body knew, and also who, being neurodivergent, carries the capacity to recognize patterns, to both feel what's happening and then look at the material evidence and perhaps see patterns that other folks are not, and then to be able to put those things together, the preemptive feeling and the pattern recognition, to have a pretty clear understanding of what we might expect to happen based on that. When you add that onto the lived experience, to the unlearning, to the ancestral epigenetic experience that I carry in this body from a lineage who has already lived through and survived cycles of precisely this kind of terror, it means that I, and perhaps you, have spent years, layers of years, years and years and years and years, pre-feeling grief and rage and terror and sorrow about this very moment, about knowing that this was where we were headed. It means that I, and perhaps you, have been sounding the alarm, as so many others have been for years and years and years, about this being where we were headed, long before we had this kind of globally broadcasted, universal, indisputable, tangible evidence to say, oh, we're here now. This is fascism. This is tyranny. We can no longer ignore that this is what this has been, and this is what it led to. So it means that in this moment, I, and perhaps you, have already metabolized a lot of what some folks are just now facing for the first time. And because of that, if you fall into this category, you might notice that in this moment, your nervous system is relatively regulated, that you are able to be relatively present with yourself in this moment, even as everything is crumbling. Being calm right now, it does not mean that you lack empathy, and it doesn't mean that you're disengaged. It doesn't mean that you don't know how serious things are. It doesn't mean that you won't still have moments where you experience waves of strong emotion moving through you. But those waves of emotion will be moving through an internal world, an internal structure that is relatively stable and coherent. One way that I've been trying to describe this for myself is that it's like the part of you that's already a future ancestor, and then from that perspective already knows that we've already lived through and survived so much shit, that we've really already lived through and survived this wearing a different face, and that nothing about this is new. That kind of inner elder in you already knows that. Now, I do think it's important to name that if this is true for you, you might have the experience of having a little bit of anger and or a little bit of grief come up at the recognition that you never got to have the illusion of this place. That illusion couldn't be shattered in you because it was never offered to you. That kind of innocence of ignorance was never afforded to you because that illusion was never built with you at the center of it. And there can be some anger or grief in that. And if you do feel that, I hope you will honor it and I hope you will make space for it and let yourself be with that because it's important. But the reality is that this structure is dead. It's already dead. We are living through the last dying breaths, but it is dead. And it's really important that we have people who are doing what we might call death doula work as this system reaches the point of actually taking its last breath. And we also need people who are doing birth doula work for what is to come. Neither of those are right or wrong. But if you are a fellow pre-feeling, pattern recognizing, epigenetically outside of illusion person like me, you have likely long since come to the understanding that trying to fight what is already dying is not going to fundamentally change anything. And this, of course, does not mean that we do not make our best efforts to support people, to care for and love and protect people as this structure dies. But if you've already come to the understanding that it's dead, you might be someone who feels that you are oriented less toward feeding the dying machine with the currency of your attention and more oriented toward being an embodiment of the co-creative future that is available to us on the other side of this death, and that's already taking shape in so many ways, internally and externally, individually and collectively. And so you are not wrong for feeling that way. You are not lacking empathy because you are not being tossed about in the chaos and the emotional charge of these latest, last, lashing out spectacles of dying breath of what is already dead. And if you're here, if you're pre-feeling and pattern recognizing with me, it's likely that you can also already feel what we are living our way into beyond this. Just like you could feel that we were headed here long before we arrived. And I'm not an oracle in the sense that I'm going to tell you the timeline. I don't know what the total cost of this death will be, and I don't know how much suffering still lies between where we are now and where we're going. But I can tell you from this body that has a very particular orientation toward pre-feeling and pattern recognition and ancestral knowledge, I can tell you that this is not the end of our story as human beings living here on this land. I can tell you that I, and maybe you, can already feel into the reality of our victory. And knowing that, feeling that, it doesn't absolve us of our responsibility and accountability. It actually clarifies our responsibility and accountability, because what this means is that we are not passive witnesses waiting to see what comes next. If we can already feel into what's coming, it means that what happens next must be shaped by the choices we make in that direction. It will be shaped by how we choose to show up, knowing what we know, feeling what we feel. And it will be shaped by our refusal of the world that's dying, our allowance of that death, and our insistence upon building the world that is coming because we insist on life. And so, what this means is that we, I and maybe you, can be less concerned with predicting the future and really place our focus on participating in the ways that are aligned for us every day in co-creating the world that we not only want, but that we can already feel is real. And I'm sharing this right now because I know that there are other folks who might be feeling something similar, right? You might be feeling this calm and clarity and groundedness in this moment of chaos and collapse. And you might even be a person who, in previous cycles of chaos and collapse, really did feel it putting you through the ringer emotionally, really did feel like you were taking it in and absorbing and processing everything that the collective was holding. And if you're not doing that right now, some part of you might feel like something is wrong. Am I numb? Am I dissociated? Am I lacking empathy? And I want you to know that if this is landing for you, I don't think this is a sign that you have lost anything of your sensitivity, your empathy, your compassion, your humanity. I think it is a sign that you are not being asked to manufacture emotional distress right now in order to prove that you care about what's happening. Because if you are someone who has already metabolized layers, lifetimes, lineages of rage and terror and grief and disillusionment about this country, you do not have to prove or perform that for anyone else. You can be exactly where you are internally. And we actually need you to be exactly where you are internally. You know, my therapist said something really important to me, and I want to share it with you. She reminded me that this system that is dying, those powers that were, they very much rely on our distress and dysregulation. They feed on it. They manipulate it, they manufacture it specifically to try to keep us out of our center and out of our clarity. But when you are in your clarity, when you are responding as you and not as your fight, flight, freeze, fawn patterns, the responses that you are able to offer in service to the collective from that place are going to be very effective in the long run, very effective for the long haul. And I'm not saying that to say that the more reactive or highly emotionally charged responses that we are seeing right now are not necessary and important. I think it is very necessary and very important that people in the moment are going out in the streets and saying, fuck no. I think that is very important, and I am grateful for everyone who is willing to do that and take those risks, to take care of each other in that way, because that is one way that care can and must show up in this moment. And if you are not in distress, not dysregulated, if you are calm and clear in this moment, we need that from you. You are experiencing that for a reason. And it's because there's something that you are meant to offer in your response that can only come from that place, that cannot come from reactivity, that cannot come from resistance and from you placing your attention on trying to fight what is already dead. And all of our bodies are different. All of our histories and lineages and current circumstances and access to resources are different. And so we are all going to meet moments like this from different vantage points of knowing and feeling. And some folks are in a moment of really navigating their first embodied sense of rupture in their relational attachment to what it means to be an American. And some of us have been post rupture for generations, post illusion for generations, and there is no right or wrong. All of it belongs. But if you, like me, are someone who has already grieved the lie, and you are now choosing to live into and co-create the truth, you are not alone. And the more that we start showing up to talk to each other, the more we will naturally discover that we are likely already practicing the ways of the future in moments large and small, individual and communal. And then we can apply our collective imagination to that from a place of shared clarity, and we can co-orient toward what is coming rather than feeling like we have to co-orient to what is dying. And when we do that, it means that when other people arrive to meet us in this co-created future place, there will actually be a there. There will actually be people and a material reality there to meet them because you are where you are, because we are where we are, because you chose to be where you are now internally and trust it and move from that place in the midst of this whirlwind. There is a lot more for us to talk about, but I will leave it here for now. I love you, and we will talk soon.